Thank you for having us. Really appreciate the different perspectives we've been seeing throughout the last few days, and the team at Media Post putting this on with the partners. Um, as Steve mentioned, Greg and I work at McKinney. A little bit about Greg's background. He comes with a background in data science. And so from a media standpoint, we're often analyzing a lot of numbers for clients. We'll talk through a little bit of that. But one of the real advancements for our team is thinking about things from like a time spent standpoint. Greg has a background in coding, and so a lot of our data cleaning, he's helped us learn how to write code in Python so that we can spend more time like analyzing the data and seeing what adjustments we need to make versus just spending time doing the same cleaning on a week in, week out basis to actually get at what the output is of the reporting. So that's just an interesting take on it. And Also, as Steve mentioned, so for Crocs, we manage their media business across 5 countries: the US, Germany, South Korea, Japan, and China. And so there's a lot of data, and trying to unify that across multiple markets has been something that has been a real helpful advancement. Um, I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with Crocs. The interesting thing about this slide is that most people can recognize many of these icons, but one of them has only been around for 16 years. You know, Alfred Hitchcock, the Porsche 911, Mickey Mouse, Coca-Cola, those brands have built their legacies over decades. This brand is a product and an icon where its logo is instantly recognizable, to the point where there's, over 60% unaided awareness of the brand globally, and that's pretty impressive for, again, a 16-year-old company. And that brand that silhouette directly ties back to the product that they sell, which is the classic clog. As Robert was just presenting in the last presentation, Greg mentioned a line that I thought was pretty funny, which is,
Yeah, I mean, the clog might be the only thing that's as divisive as politics. We typically see consumers either love or hate the clog. It's a good problem to have if you could model it and know which half not to advertise to.
yeah, and the clog, while it's instantly recognizable, the challenge that the brand faces is that they sell a ton of other products. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with the fact that Crocs sells heels, wedges, flats, loafers, sandals, slides. Both of us are wearing Crocs, and they're not like your traditional pair of clogs that you see. And so while it's not an awareness challenge at the flagship product level, we are looking to drive awareness of all these other products. I mean, the classic clog is roughly 50% of the business, but a lot of other products are available. And the challenge for us is to identify, how do we know and segment these audiences and then serve them up the right ad in whatever tactic that we're talking about. And so when we think about planning for the business overall, we sort of start with consideration at the top of the funnel. And there is a goal around awareness. There is you can't buy what you don't know, but it's really specific to all of the other product lines outside of the classic clog. And so we measure a lot of other KPIs like impressions and views and whatnot, but most of what we're focusing on are the cost per metrics, cost per landing page visit, so that we know that as a proxy for interest and consideration in the product page that's tied to what you came to there for, and then eventually all the way down to what's the cost per transaction, and how do we do that as efficiently as possible. Now, video plays itself in a couple of these places, especially pre-roll. We do some custom integrations with a handful of partners to try to get at more nuanced messaging that we need to do, or do product launches, and then also paid social as just another place to amplify some of the video messaging that we've got. Everything that we've been doing and the focus on the bottom line metrics has led to a couple different things. One, the business is doing really well. So one of the main competitors that you see in red is Skechers. Skechers spends, they spend over $100 million, I think, last reported spend that we looked at. And then the NASDAQ, which is where Crocs is, they're significantly outpacing the market. But it's also created this almost like an open checkbook type environment with the clients and the board, to the point where the more we're able to prove out that the marketing is driving driving sales and doing so efficiently, the better off we are in terms of being able to strategically plan those dollars on behalf of the clients. So for 2018, digital video makes up only about 7% of our total global spend. In the past, and this is because of a couple different reasons that we'll walk you through, but in the past, in 2015, when we started this process of revitalizing this brand, we ran we spent about 50% of our budget in video. Most of that was in traditional television across 25 or so TV networks. But since then, what's happened is a couple things. Because of scalability across the globe, we've shifted away from television, so we were only running in TV in the US and Japan, and we couldn't really afford, with smaller budgets and many of the other global markets, to scale television. We've shifted to 100% digital mix, and video is certainly part of that. And then the clients have also invested in some celebrities that have global recognition. So Drew Barrymore, and in the past John Cena in the US, and then a couple of K-pop singers for APAC. And this shift to this campaign has led us, and the 100% digital plan has let us scale, which we weren't previously able to do as easily with television.
So kind of getting into that digital space, right? Video typically comes with a much higher premium. So a lot of what we look at from a media perspective is, and I think this was a topic earlier this week, was managing media as a stock portfolio. So we very much take a similar approach and stance on that. So right out of the gate, you can tell that video is going to come at a higher CPM, so we're really going to have to work hard to prove out the value on the back end. Now, one of the challenges with that is, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with the anchoring effect, but basically, whatever the first price point is, you're going to keep referencing that. So this is, in terms of selling into the client, when that reference point is always the lower CPM, it's what am I getting for this increased CPM? If I'm not getting increased reach, then what am I really getting for that? So how do we measure all of this media? So there are kind of different timelines, I guess you could say. In flight, we use DoubleClick as our ad server, which I assume is pretty standard for most folks. With that, you can really get at those cost per metrics. But with standard attribution models and items like that, it's easy to look at things in the short term and kind of get lost in kind of that microscope of what is going on in this 30-day window. So we like to think of kind of our in-flight metrics as, we will move media back and forth based off of the metrics that we're seeing, but these are really like managing the business for the next quarterly report. But businesses have much larger aspirations than just this quarter. So kind of the two other sources of information that we have to balance whatever we're seeing in the short term are, we do a ComScore brand study that we get a readout twice a year, and that allows us to kind of between campaigns and seasons adjust kind of that mix. So part of what's been coming out of ComScore has led to a little bit of a decrease in video, but it's also helped support the fact that we need this in the campaign for our messaging. And then on the Crocs end, they also do a brand strength monitor and a few other focus groups that are very helpful and insightful for what the strategy and tactics might be. So really in terms of messaging and the tactics that we choose, that really comes into play. So in terms of kind of what we're looking at in flight, I know, so we'll go back a couple of slides here. At the top end of this funnel, we're looking at higher level metrics for the most part. And that's where, we're looking at a cost per landing page or something along that lines. And we typically, this is where the majority of our video spend is. So, and we'll also, for video, we'll compare between partners on cost per completion. So we're kind of getting at how efficiently are we getting exposure to folks, and then also how efficiently are they at at getting people to the site, right? Because ultimately we want them to buy. But video is something that it carries a deeper message with it a lot of times. And so it can be hard to measure this initially. We've done a few more projects to kind of build out the data capabilities and segmentation strategy on the Crocs side. And these have actually been, we're kind of just going down this road of building a DMP with Adobe and Crocs. And so about 2 months ago, the initial build out was finished, and we've been able to just start testing. And there's definitely been some interesting learnings from the video side. For example, taking the audience that is exposed to video and targeting them on Facebook, we're seeing about 40% lower cost per leads there. So definitely video has an impact that we need to understand a little bit better in the long term. So kind of back to those metrics, in the short term, that 30-day attribution window, right, we can see that display is driving a much higher RPM, and when paired with the cost side, it's a higher ROI. And again, on the cost per landing page front, display is pretty effective. So from a short-term perspective, if we were to just look at these metrics, then we would probably lose sight of a little bit of the bigger picture and not be able to really explain what video is doing for us.
And we are often asked the question, should we be doing video? How much should we be doing? And then when we think about some of those advanced television options, they come with much higher CPMs than the average CPM we reference with some of the video we're buying. And so that's where the conversations around a lot of these key measures that we're looking at beyond the short-term metrics really come in to have a good, fruitful conversation with the clients, because we all understand the role and value that video plays. It's really about trying to identify how much of it that we need to have within the plan so that we can mitigate the risk of, to the bottom line in terms of how efficient we can be.
Absolutely. So these key measures are what we track through the ComScore brand study. And you can see here videos highlighted. And really, for the most part, you can tell that display, it impacts top-level awareness and intent to purchase, but it's not really changing the perception of the brand. For example, video is able to communicate the value and the style a bit better, and returning significant lift on those fronts.
So just a quick background on this. So what the readout of the ComScore report is it takes a look at a lot of the tactics that we're running and says which tactics are providing how much lift and where do you see it at a significant level. So everything highlighted in green is where we're seeing a significant lift at a 90% confidence level. And so video in this case is being seen and shown to the team and the clients that it's actually providing complementary value to the plan. And what we try to do overall is get away from a conversation about expensive or cheap and really talk to our clients and ourselves about the value that we can extract by spending any given dollar.
Yeah, and so the value of video is really coming out in these longer term measures. So it can be hard to optimize in mid-campaign too. So
a little view into what we're doing. So we've got, and I think that just to preface some of this, I think there's a lot of advancements that we can continue to make per what we've talked about, what we heard with Bryant yesterday from Purple. There are a lot of things that we could be doing, but currently we, because the retail calendar is so far in advance, and what the clients have to do is now they have to make the creative and sell it into a lot of the distributors to tell them, how they're going to support the brand so that they buy X thousands of units of all their shoe lines. And so it forces us to not be as nimble because we have to plan so far in advance. But that said, how can we take some of the learnings from other advertisers and say, oh, well, if we shoot, 3 or 4 beginnings, that might be an interesting way to test down the road. So we've got some long form content at the brand level. So there's a minute 40-second karaoke themed musical bit that we'll play for you in a little bit. There's a 30-second cut down, 15, 6-second versions. The 6-second versions have been really interesting in the sense that because they're priced more efficiently than the 30-second units, like we're able to then compare them more closely to some of the display costs, and there's an increased appetite there. We do some paid social to amplify that, and then recently we did our first foray for this brand into Snapchat, which had really positive results. So we'll give you a view into what some of that content looks like.
What if we were all comfortable in our own shoes, just the way we are? See, perfect isn't easy. Some would say that it's a dream, but comfortable is always and
Trey, you're welcome to sing along.
'Cause when you're being you and you don't care what people think, you'll find happiness in good or bad weather. Ahem. Good or bad weather. You don't have to be a model and look a certain way. You don't have to have the perfect bod or nail the perfect take. Just come as you are and do the things that you will do. Just get comfortable in your own shoes. Come on, everyone! You can fly across the oceans or just hang out by the pool. You can play, you can splash, or simply keep it cool. Just come as you are and do the things that you will do. Just get comfortable in your own shoes. You don't have to grow a garden or bake the perfect cake. You don't have to be a super mom and always save the day. Just come as you are and do the things that you will do. Just get comfortable in your own shoes. Come on, get comfortable with yourself,
So a couple
with
of
each other.
things with this. A lot of the learnings from the past few years have been incorporated into some of the stuff we're doing with videos are often playing without sound, or you need to get people's attention, and so the copy on the bottom is pretty standard into stuff that we're putting in so that it can maybe entice someone into putting on the audio or actually getting the gist of what it is to, maybe decide to tune in at a later date. Then at the beginning, as Brian mentioned, like the logo is on in the first 3 seconds so that there's at least some residual branding that's left there. We've also worked with companies like Now This to help, because they're specializing more in taking video content and optimizing for the social space. So basically, how do we take some long form and cut it down and make it a little more poppier for better consumption there. And then this Snapchat lens, which is I'd say it's like a different form of video, because what we did was we put the lens out there. There was a meme that existed of a dog wearing Crocs on its head, and people were making fun of it, and some people were loving it very much in a polarizing way. And so we played off of that, and the clients opted in to support this sort of thing and see how it was going to work, because the brand does really well with certain demographics, but then they also want to push younger. And the comfort is a very functional benefit, but style is an area where we're trying to push the needle on and trying to get a bit more trendy with the younger audiences. So something like white clogs are really popular with high school students, for example, right now. And so with something like Snapchat, what could we do? And we put this lens out there where we basically gave people the option to wear the clog on their head. And it's so ridiculous and interesting and funny and whatever that people, we had 24 million impressions of this. We had 16 million plays and views of the lens, and people started putting out content like this on their own. It's just so ridiculous that people, but it was something in it for themselves, and they were sharing this at a 7% share rate within this platform itself, but they were sharing branded content with one another versus us just paying to serve up an impression to expose them to the brand. And then outside of that, we also try to use video very purposefully for specific tactics. So for example, we've got different products within the entire product line. So over here you see a flame clog. There's also like a hot chili pepper clog that's specifically catered to people that work in the restaurant business. It's part of the Crocs work line. They also have versions for nurses and hospital type settings where you're on your feet every day, all day, and comfort really matters. And so we partnered with a property called Chef's Feed that specifically is more for chefs among themselves, and it's really about inspiring one another to be better at their trade and their craft. With a company called Mind Body Green, we took the Crosslight line, which is newly introduced this year, and within that musical, you may have caught a scene where there were people doing yoga, and so we played off of that and did an event in New York with Tara Stiles, who leads her own yoga studio, and Mind Body Green, and we have people that were never exposed to yoga try something out and kind of get comfortable in their own, in their own shoes and try something different. And so that was very tactically used to help raise awareness of this new product line. And then there's a very obvious low-hanging fruit area, which is people often take Crocs with them when they travel. They're very lightweight, they're very easy to slip on and off, and they're very comfortable. So we're partnering with Lonely Planet later this year to create a series of video content pieces that basically highlight people traveling throughout. There'll be videos of them packing that have the products organically integrated and used throughout the piece. So we have a clip of the Chef's Feed integration, which we'll just show you a short version of it. You'll see that this is something we don't often try to do, which is basically like create branded content that has little snippets of the product, because ultimately it's not like the deepest explanation of what you need to use this product for, and it's almost like a brought to you by. But in this scenario, the exception was made because it's a specific environment for chefs, and they're trying to inspire one another to think about different dishes that they can make and how they serve their client base. So this is an example of one of the 4 videos we created with Chef's Feed.
You don't come to Wynwood Kitchen and Bar and say, well, I'm going to eat Italian, or I'm going to eat Mediterranean. We don't do the basic or the standard. I'm not trying to fool people, but I'm trying to twist it up a little bit. When I started here at Wynwood Kitchen and Bar, we had a totally different menu. I had to put an empanada on the menu. Every Latin American country has.
So the chef basically talks about his inspiration and some of the signature dishes he has and why, and throughout his day we show glimpses of him wearing Crocs. But the videos were supported with different forms of media on their property, and it led to a contest that people submitted and entered in to win Crocs for their entire kitchen staff. And so it was just another way to get the product on the feet of the right people and also get them talking about themselves as a way to raise awareness of the brand and the product line. So that's an overarching view of a lot of what we're doing, and a few of the learnings that we continue to keep in mind is there are more and more advancements in the way we can use video, and so how do we continue to have conversations with our team and the client on what is the role of video, how can we use it, at what cost does it make sense, and does it pay out? How do we keep testing and learning? And then how do we try to get ahead of the retail cycle in a way that does enable us to creatively test and plan for just better ways to improve versus sticking with the schedule that we're having to deal with, because that is what it's been in the past.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Caught me by surprise. We have any questions? Quick question? Yeah.
So I see here you brought Josh from Performance again. I saw that you have a very strong celebrity program, obviously Drew Barrymore, et cetera, in the U.S. How does the Mario Batali effect impact the brand, or have you seen any impact associated with that?
If you do a Google search, you'll see him wearing his signature orange Crocs from the past. I mean, he hasn't been officially affiliated with the company for many years now. So I think that there may be some if we did like a Google trend search, we may see him pop every now and then when he's in the news for the latest, discretions. But outside of that, I don't think we've really paid much attention to it. We've certainly not done anything to, add more fuel to that fire. We've sort of just kept doing more of our own stuff. And like I mentioned with the Crocs and the white clogs. So one of the things that the client did on their own is there was a high school student in the Tampa area that tweeted at Crocs saying, "Hey, wouldn't it be awesome if me and my classmates that are graduating this year could wear white clogs to graduation? How many retweets would it take for us to make that happen?" And the client within 2 hours replied, 2018. And it just automatically sort of like got to 2018, and they sent that whole high school senior class white clogs. And so they're doing things to try to help change the news to more favorable ways. And there's some things out of our control that we won't really be able to minimize. But we've not done anything on our own to give it any more visibility.
How are you measuring or attributing the impact of emerging and social video like the Snapchat lens?
So the Snapchat lens is obviously a little bit more difficult. Walled gardens are what they are, right? But with the Snapchat lens, we were able to do another brand study specific to that. The one unfortunate piece with a specific study to one tactic is you can't use that to compare across all of your platforms. And one of the great parts about not just Snapchat, but Google is they'll do a brand lift study, and it uses search results and other pieces like that, and it's great information. But as a media buyer, we'd like to buy that sort of measurement from Google across all of the tactics, because that's just great information to use and great data. But they'll only do the lift analysis on their own platforms.
So the Millward Brown study that was done with that Snapchat execution showed a 22-point lift in ad exposure or awareness of that execution to those that played around with the lens and those that didn't. So that was positive traction. And then we had 73% earned impressions beyond what was paid because of all the share rates. So a lot of the more upper funnel metrics, if you will, started giving the clients more reassurance in the sense that even though this is emerging, that it wasn't like a failure. It was something that showed promise against a new, younger audience. And so I think that there's a little bit more leeway there. And especially knowing that like 70-80% of our plan is kind of keeping the lights on, there's a little bit more freedom to try and test new things here and there.
Is there creative continuity between the celebrity-driven video and the display campaign?
Yeah, so the musical is a large part of kind of the display campaign as well. I will say there are a lot more display variations, similar to what the last speakers were talking about with video just being more difficult to produce. I believe right now we have somewhere near 15,000 different display variants in market and about a dozen various cut downs between 6 seconds, 15s, and 30s on the video side. So, that's definitely something that's very different between the kind of the two channels there. But yeah, there's definitely creative continuity in terms of images and text, font, all that sort of good stuff. The end cards on the video look very similar to the regular display ads.
Greg and Swap, thanks very much. You guys are going to be doing a roundtable in about 30 minutes. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.